Good afternoon, everyone, or good day, wherever you may be. I see a lot of new faces who are joining us for the first time. Welcome to the Ateneo de Manila University Department of Economics and Ateneo Center for Economic Research and Development Seminar Series. For those of you who has joined us for the first time this afternoon, I hope you have enjoyed our mini virtual tour of the campus. As the university opens up, perhaps next year or next semester, we can welcome you on site for our seminar series next semester. Before we begin, let me remind everyone of our house rules for the seminar. We will let the speaker finish his presentation first before we entertain questions. Zoom participants, kindly stay muted and stop sharing your video during the duration of the presentation, except of course our speaker. During Q&A, please virtually raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged. You may unmute and show yourself when asking your question, and please do identify your institutional affiliation when asking your questions. Same on participants on FB. You may post your question in the comment sections and we will read them out for you. Slide, videos, and other materials from the seminar are posted on our website and also on our YouTube channel. Only when the speaker gives his consent for sharing them. This afternoon, our speaker gave his consent. Let me introduce you to our speaker for this afternoon. We are very pleased to have Professor Asad Islam, who is the Director of the Center for Development Economics and Sustainability and Professor of Economics at Monash University. He has extensive experience working in the field to implement academic and policy-relevant research in the area of education, health, and program evaluation. His research work spans a number of developing countries, including Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, China, Cambodia, Uganda, and Tanzania. He has conducted numerous surveys and field experiments, including randomized controlled trials, to understand the efficacy of various interventions on education, health, microfinance, social networks, and more recently, intervention during COVID-19 on mental health, remote learning, and vaccine take-up. His research often uses field experiments, lab in the field experiments, randomized controlled trials, and natural experiments. He has published widely in top economics journals based on his research on education. His work is supported by international grants such as Australian Research Council, UK Research Council, DFID AusAid, International Growth Center, European Commission, Asian Development Bank, and the World Bank. Without further ado, let me give you Professor Asad Islam to present his work on conducting randomized controlled trials in developing countries, lessons, and practices. Professor Islam, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Maha. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I am, as Maha said, that I am basically a development economist trying to work to try to understand people in the field. And the lecture that I'm going to give is basically based on my experience in last 1 decade working in field. In particular, a lot of my work is in Bangladesh, which I will draw upon. So before I start, let me share the slides. Okay, so is it clear, Maha?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thanks. So today I'm going to talk about mainly the conducting randomized control trials and the practical issues that we face in running the RCTs. I'm trying to go a little bit and more on practical side, but also giving you an insights about what things you need to consider when you are thinking about randomized control trial from the theoretical side. So this is going to be, I hope, useful for students and researchers who are interested in general the program evaluation, but more particularly using RCTs to try to understand different policies and programs. Um, so let me start with this. Why do we consider randomized control trials as a kind of policy and program evaluation? First of all, let me clarify that randomized control trial is a tool used for policy and program evaluation. It is not the only tool used for program and policy evaluation. So some people try to think that you should always use RCTs for program and policy evaluation. That's not what I view, because there are other tools we can use to try to understand program and policies. So, but it has become an important tool and in fact, a kind of gold standard to understand what policies and what programs work. So, and why? Because policymakers in general are interested to know whether the intervention or the program that they are actually pursuing uh, are making any difference in the real world. And in order to understand that, we also need to think about very simply whether these policies or program are working. And RCTs offer a very simpler way to understand the program and policies. Anything that is not randomized control trial require, a lot of technical and methodological issues to deal with. Any kind of results that are dependent on particular methods are subject to criticism, because if your results are dependent on the methods that you use, then it means that different people can come up with different conclusions um, uh, using different methods, and there might not be um, a single method that is appropriate for a given context. But the RCTs offer a simpler way, because in a randomized control trial, what you have is a one group that receives the intervention and another that does not receive the intervention. We call control group. And if we randomly allocate this group into a treatment group that receives the intervention and a control group that does not receive the intervention, then anything else doesn't matter, because any difference that we observe at the end of intervention is a kind of effect that we would get after that intervention, because nothing else happened. And if anything else happened, it is not due to the intervention, then you can attribute any difference between treatment and control group is due to the intervention. So any program effect that you observe, you can simply use the summary statistics of the treatment and control group, which is just simple mean of the treatment and control group. Say if you are evaluating an educational intervention, basically, and if you say that, okay, I'm giving textbook to students in schools and try to understand whether that helped to raise the students' test scores at the end of the year. So all you need to do is to offer the treatment group the textbook and control group no textbook, and you do that in a randomized control trial way. And then at the end of the year, if you observe any difference in test scores between treatment and control group, then you can attribute the difference is due to the effect of the textbooks. So that's the beauty of the randomized control trial, because it is very simple and intuitive way, and it is easier for you to explain to the policymakers, because you don't really need to say that you are using this technique and to try to understand this impact of this program. Okay, but there are challenges. I mean, it's not as simple as I am saying, but in terms of the end product, it is that simple. But when you are running the program, there you face a number of challenges. As a researchers, you even face more challenges. If you are a government in government and policy making, then you also face a number of other issues. For example, do you want to expand the program to everyone? Okay, or only to certain group of people, or do you think this program should everybody should get this program or not? Okay, at the beginning. Then how do you actually randomize? Because in a randomized control trial, you offer one group and exclude another group randomly. Okay? And also, if you are trying to run a small program, if your sample size is small, because I said that treatment group and control group are randomly allocated, and there are issues in terms of the sample size. If your sample is not large enough, then basically you might end up with a small sample, and that can that may not able to detect the treatment effect that you are trying to estimate. Okay? There are issues, for example, in the context of disaster, in terms of the war, when the refugees come, if you want to offer a program, what sort of program you want to offer, and for in the context of COVID-19 that we have been observing, so how you allocate the resources if you have limited resources, okay, and whether you can run randomized control trial to do this way, okay, and if you are a researcher trying to use your own limited research budget to understand whether a program works, then you are also facing a more difficult choice. Yes. And we will discuss all these issues one by one. I will not be able to answer all the questions because some of the questions are still unresolved, and because I am going to talk in 40 minutes. So, and I am actually teaching a course on randomized control trial here at Monash University. So I cannot finish in 40 minutes all the answers, but I hope it will generate some interest among you, and you can actually find some answers later on as well. In terms of the implementation challenge, yeah, there are also issues of whether you want to implement through an NGOs or government or private sector. There are logistical delay and political challenges associated with it. In some context, you cannot really run the intervention. There are political barriers, and also, the control group, that group that does not receive the intervention, you need to think about them, whether they are receiving any kind of benefit or whether they are being adversely impacted by the intervention. So those sort of things you need to keep in mind when you are running an intervention. Okay, so in which context we can run this intervention? So there are many kind of situation where you can actually use those situation and run an intervention. For example, when you are designing some new program, then it's easy, right? Then you can think about, okay, you want to offer the program, you are not sure whether the program actually works or not, then it's easy to run the program. It could be just adding services to the program, or it could be new people that you want to include in the program, or new locations. So you want to randomize in those contexts, so to try to understand whether the program actually makes a difference in those settings. Okay. Sometimes you have too many people who are interested, and you cannot offer to everybody. So in that case, you can randomize. And sometimes not even, though you are offering to many people, not many people are interested in. Okay. So that is an issue that you need to also think about, how you can actually randomize to get people interested in it. In some context, you cannot offer the program at the same time, but you can offer it on a rotation basis. If you are thinking about, for example, admission into university or in a school setting, you might also want to think about the admission cutoff rule, and you can also do randomized control trial in those settings. So there are many ways where in settings you can run randomized control trial. And it's not really that difficult. Sometimes it is actually very less costly to do to run randomized control trial. And in many other contexts, it is also very expensive. So if you are a student, you might think about, okay, how we can actually run an intervention that doesn't even require that much cost. Because that's what students and early career researchers who do not have funding, large funding, then you might also think about these situations. Okay? The first question that I want to answer is sometimes people think, oh, okay, you are excluding some people. It's randomized control trial is kind of unethical. Okay, but how do we allocate resources when we have limited resources? Okay, if we are not sure about who should get exactly, and even if we know that, we might not be able to offer everybody, because even within that set of people, say, let's say some people are eligible. Even we don't have enough resources to offer every eligible people. How do we actually allocate resources? Isn't it ethical to randomly allocate? Because then you are not, excluding someone intentionally based on some criteria that is not observable to people. Okay. So it is on the ground of ethical consideration. I don't think you should be worried too much about whether randomized control trial is ethical or unethical, because ethical issues sometimes arise where if the program is very effective, then whether you should offer, the control group that same program. But you do not know until you test the intervention. So that's why if you are not sure, it is better to test the intervention, because you do not want to waste a lot of resources and then end up with something that doesn't make any difference to people. So that is actually more unethical, that you are wasting resources that could have been utilized better. So that's why it is important to know, and in order to understand, you better actually randomized control trial is the best approach to actually do. So on the ethical ground, even whether you are experimental evaluation evaluator or non-experimental evaluator, it doesn't matter, because if you need to exclude, it is better to exclude through randomization, through lottery. So then there is no selection issue that you are excluding some people, based on some favor, but based on some other grounds, not based on the eligibility. Okay, and other issue that is open in the social science context, particularly a problem, is the control group, whether the control group receiving the intervention. And my recommendation is, in the beginning, do not actually inform the control group that there is a program going on, okay? Because then there is some kind of problem that arises, which I'm going to touch upon later on. So the simple rule is, because the control group people might feel betrayed in many ways. Okay, and the logic of not doing that is you want to test it, and before it is known that when the program works, you do not want to raise unnecessary expectations among the control group. So that's the so one example is is a famous study by Miguel and Kramer published in one of the top journals in economics in econometric, and Michael Kramer is got the Nobel Prize. In fact, this is the main study for which he is famous for. In Kenya, they ran a deworming program, and they evaluated the program, and they found that the health intervention based on the deworming actually has a large effect on education of the students. So in fact, the benefit was more on the education than the health itself. And what they do it is they offered the same intervention to control group people 2 years after they rolled out the intervention in the treatment group. So the control group people received the intervention, but only after 2 years. So one option to I mean, if you have resources, is actually to include the control group after the treatment works. The main problem that arises is, you have to at least wait for those time period to offer to the control group. And sometimes people argue that maybe in 2 years something has changed, and control group may not remain in the same position. So whether excluding the control group is an issue, I mean, it's debatable, but this is the best approach you can do actually. In social science, unlike in medical trial, like in medical trial, you can give placebo, right? So a drug, and people do not know whether they are in the treatment and control group. In social science, you are giving cash, or you are offering some benefits, which is observable, and you cannot really hide one group from another group. So that actually creates a problem. For example, during the COVID-19, we offered a mental health intervention to women in poor settings in Bangladesh, in rural area. And we offered them counseling and some information about where they can find food and other issues if they are in trouble, and also some mental health support. But then people might say, oh, okay, so whether your intervention, the impact that you observe at the end, is it due to the, just phone call, you call them someone, or is it because the information content in the phone? We cannot really isolate, because sometimes you just making a phone call could make a difference. Okay, but you just cannot, as a program person, you cannot call someone and talk something that doesn't make any sense, especially during this time of crisis. So you have to offer them something substantive when you are calling. So in our case, we did not actually do anything in the control group, because we actually did not want to talk to them and say something that is not really good or important something, and they might wonder about why we call them actually. Okay, so one effect is due to calling, and another effect is due to the information. In this case, or in this kind of setting, you probably should not think about treating the control group in some ways. Okay. So once you are settled with, okay, I want to run a randomized control trial, then the issue that arises, how do I randomize? There are many ways to randomize things. And each of these that I'm going to talk has also different other ways to do that. The main three ways is through lotteries, and the second one is the gradually you phase in, and third one is the encouragement design. So each of this has different implication. The most common approach is the lottery. Again, you can conduct lottery in different ways, and I can spend 2-3 lectures about how to conduct the lotteries, because but the simple and intuitive approach is actually which I mentioned a little bit before, that you offer one group randomly and another group also do not receive the intervention, but you randomly exclude those people. But sometimes you might say, oh, there are some people who should really get that. And there are some people who shouldn't get that at all. If you know those situations, then you should actually identify those groups. So then the people who are really not deserving, you should exclude them. People who deserve the game, you should offer them if you have that resources. And there are people in between. You are not sure whether these people should get it or not. In those cases, you run the randomized control trial among this group of people, okay? And to try to understand whether the program works. But the caveat is actually you can only generalize the results for this group of people, because these are different group of people than the other two groups who are deserving, who are not deserving. So you need to keep that in mind when you want to, suggest to policymakers what your results imply. Who are the groups actually you are talking about? So you will not be able to generalize the results in for other groups of people, but still you can run this randomized control trial among these groups. So the other approach is, which I mentioned in the beginning, is rather than offering all groups together, you have the treatment and control group, and once you know the treatment works, then you offer the control group. So the same intervention. It's a gradual phase in. You might have 2, 3, 4 groups that can be done. So currently, we are running an intervention on COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy in Bangladesh, India, and in Indonesia. What we are doing is, in some areas, vaccines are available, and in other areas, vaccines are really not that much available. So what we are doing is we randomly allocate some areas we call the phase 1, and in another area we call phase 2, but we are randomly selecting this to try to understand how much is the vaccine hesitant, non-take-up is due to the excess problem. Because if the vaccine is not available in your door, you might not go and to the town and get the vaccinated, especially for people who are not really that mobile, women with children or older people or people who do not have money to go to town and to get vaccinated, become vaccinated. So we are randomly allocating some areas in now to actually offer information, incentives, and also giving them access to the vaccine to try to understand whether the vaccine hesitancy is due to this kind of issues, or when the vaccine becomes available, they get vaccine automatically. So in 3 months down the road, when the vaccines become more available, we will be testing another set of areas, but we are actually at the moment we are excluding them randomly. So we will be able to check whether the same intervention works differently in different time periods. So then we will be able to check whether information or is an important issue, or is it because the vaccine availability was an important issue to try to test this. So there are ways you can phase in, and depending on the context of the program that you are offering, and also there are issues like when you do not have capacity to actually roll out the intervention all in one go. So you probably want to go in phases, and you want to probably do it randomly, because then it is more fairer than targeting some area that is favorite to you, but not favorite to the opposition parties or someone else. So randomly allocating areas in different time periods to actually evaluate the intervention is another way. The third and final way is people, okay, you want to give people the intervention to everybody, but and everybody should actually have access to the intervention, but there is still a scope for RCTs. So sometimes you might say, oh, okay, all people are getting the program, so how do we do RCTs? So we call it encouragement design. It's basically uh, giving some sort of information to take up the program. You can say that, okay, this program is going on in your door. It's available to everybody. But if you want to access this, this is the way to go, actually. This is how you want to take up the program. So by giving some additional information to a group of people randomly allocated, you are encouraging those people to take that intervention. Remember here, you are able to evaluate the effect of the the encouragement, not the effect of that program, because the program is available to everybody. You can evaluate the effect of the encouragement on the take up of the program, and then you can say that, okay, once you take up, you can evaluate the impact, right? So you are kind of the take up is a kind of exogenously determined by your encouragement design. By it could be like a simple letter sending to people houses, telling them how they can access the program, or you could be a phone call that you can actually do that. Like in during this COVID-19, we gave a lot of phone calls in Bangladesh, in India, to people actually to encourage them to access to the government programs. So that is another way to kind of what we call encouragement design to actually evaluate the impact of the government program, but you are evaluating the effect of your encouragement design, and then subsequently what people benefit, the impact of after they take up the intervention. Okay, so you can use that what we call the two-stage list test curves. In the first stage, the encouragement design, and in the second stage, the take-up effect of the take-up of the intervention. That's something I am like simple econometrics, but still you can run an RCT to try to evaluate the effect of intervention. Okay, so there are different ways you can run the randomization. One approach is like you need to think about whether it is a group of people that you want to use it as a unit of randomization, or is it single individual? For example, if you are giving textbook, can you give textbook to one individual in a classroom? Probably not. You have to probably give the whole classroom textbook. So in that case, the classes is the unit of randomization, or it might be the school, the school as a whole. Depending on the context, your unit of randomization will be different, and it's always better. I mean, for the statistical purpose, the smaller the unit, the better it is, because then you have more units to randomize. When you want to randomize the school, you have fewer schools. When you want to randomize the students, you have lots of students. The benefit of randomizing at the student level is that the more observations you have, the more statistical power you have, and the easier to detect. The cost is because students talk to each other, sit down each other, so they spill over to other students. So even some students are randomly allocated. They will actually offer the same kind of book, or at least the other students might benefit from this treated students. So that means that control group, in your case, cannot be those students who are in the same school and the same classroom and did not receive the intervention, because they simply are benefiting or impacted through the students who received the intervention. So your control group should be students from schools who did not receive the intervention at all. So unit of randomization is the school level, and that means you have less number of observation effectively, because here students are not the unit, schools are unit. So you need to have a lot of schools. That means you have a costly exercise. So whether you want to do that, it depends on the context. In some cases, you can do randomization at the individual level if you think that people are not benefiting from each other, and you can actually exclude some people without informing the others, and the other people will not be informed, or there will not be any information spillovers. And you need to think all these issues, and it requires, again, this is a very lengthy topic, but the point I'm trying to make is that the more sample you have, the better statistical power you have, and it is easier for you to detect the treatment effect. And you need to balance between the cost and benefit between unit of randomization, whether it is at the group level or individual level, whether spillover is happening or not. If spillover is happening, say, for example, at the individual level, then you should have randomization at a group level. Okay. So, for example, and the other issue is in terms of randomization is you can reduce the cost of randomization if you have multiple RCTs running in the same areas, because then you can use the same set of field work and experience to run the intervention. For example, the COVID-19 mental health intervention that I just talked about, we ran the intervention in some districts in Bangladesh, but at the same time, we also ran an educational intervention among children in primary schools, and the educational was given also remotely. The mental health was also given through phone, but we had to involve in each village a person's to do survey and other things. So, and we could use just a single surveyor from a village to actually run both surveys. And because the sample doesn't overlap, it was easier for us to include that person and also minimize the cost. So if you are thinking about minimizing cost, and if you have a capacity, it is better to run simultaneous intervention, but that doesn't overlap to each other, then it doesn't contaminate the one program from running another program actually. So there is one thing they call randomization bias. Sometimes the program people are very must actually over enthusiastic. You want to show the effect of the program. Your field workers might actually be very enthusiastic to show you that they are impressive, they have done very great job, and they want to tell you nice stories. So you have to be careful about the field workers. You have to give them assurance that, hey, whatever happens, happens. You give us the right picture. Whether the program works or not doesn't matter. Your salary, your jobs do not depend on whether the program is very effective or not, because they might also, strategically induce the treatment subjects or control subjects, or they might also inflate some issues. So you have to be careful about running those interventions. And also, in some cases, you could, in principle, separate the program team from the evaluation team. Though it is practically very difficult because the evaluation team needs help from the program team to identify the people who are they need to go and survey. But in many contexts, it is possible. So you might also think about. Also, you could also think about blinding the participants, so they don't know whether they are in the treatment group or in control group. In medical trial, it is easier because the drug that you are taking, you don't know whether in a placebo group or you are in the treatment group. But in social science, it is more difficult because you know whether you are getting that cash, or you are getting textbook, or you are getting some other benefit, rice or other things. So it's really difficult in when something is offering to one group so. But if it is possible, it is, as I said in the beginning, it is at least recommended that the control group do not know that the program is running, and you are offering them some groups and you are excluding them actually the program. So a related issue is the social desirability bias. Again, you are giving some groups some intervention, and you are asking them, say, for example, the mental health intervention that we gave them. We asked them after 3 months of the intervention how they are feeling. Okay, they might say, okay, well, I'm feeling great because if I say something bad because you gave me some intervention, and I should tell you some nice thing about that. And so it's called social desirability bias. In many other settings, like it could be, religious and political views, it could be intimate partner violence or sexual activity, you might give answer that is desirable, but you are not really talking the right thing sometimes. So how do you actually identify, particularly in the context of intervention, because if you are giving in some people benefit, the treatment group might say something that is that looks nice to you. So what we did we actually ran an intervention in Rohingya refugee camp in Bangladesh, and we gave the mothers psychological support and also some play-based activity for the children. And then we evaluated after a year of the intervention. And so you might say, okay, we actually asked mothers about their children, how they are feeling, how they are doing. And these are self-reported, and the mother might actually say nice thing because we gave them a whole year of intervention. And in order to identify whether these results that you are getting are due to this kind of bias, that you are inducing, there is no measure. I mean, it's a very old concept in the psychology, but in economics, people are now using this Marlon-Crony social desirability scale. So basically, it is a kind of some questions asking to individuals about how good they are feeling, what sort of things they are doing, and whether that is too nice to do actually. And you can actually see whether that measures of desirability correlates with your actual answers, and whether that differs between treatment and control group. And if that differs, then you can identify whether the treatment group who are showing more strategic, who are giving some nice answer to your mental health question, are also the group of people who are showing more socially desirable answer in this scale. So that's a way to actually try to give some idea about whether your results are driven by some kind of desirable answers. Okay, so I am running out of time. I know so there are many issues that I wanted to cover, but I'm going very quickly. Uh, few issues that you need to think about. You might have attrition, like some people leave the program and you cannot really survey them at the end line. You observe them in the baseline, you call attrition. You need to think about that. You need to think about whether the program effects spill over to other people. You also need to think about, the effects may not be, I mean, sometimes you might have a zero effect treatment effect on average, but you might have a heterogeneous effects, like some groups benefiting a lot, others group not actually not benefiting, and on average you find the treatment effect is zero. So you actually need to think about also heterogeneity and treatment effect. And these days, we actually have this pre-analysis plan in the American Economic Association registry. We need to specify this before you go and run the intervention. So then, because sometimes people actually, fish the data and try to find out something. And now, because of the pre-registration, you have to specify everything in advance so that after the airline survey, whatever you find, you can tell that, okay, this is what I expected in the when I registered, and this is how I found. You can report some additional results, but then you have to be clear that, okay, this is not what I anticipated before I ran the intervention, but this is what I found. And people can take things as it is, actually. So if you are interested to know, we have a recent paper again on this mental health thing. Um, uh, and we actually have specified clearly in the paper what was in our pre-registration, what was not, and what we find in each of this set of outcomes. Because after the intervention, we found some of the outcomes that is interesting, but we did not mention in the registration, but we clarified that actually. So again, and those things actually you need to think about. Again, in terms of the dropout or the attrition, there are few issues. Some people drop out and you don't find them. Some people come back again if you're running intervention for over several years. So then you have called occasional participants that you need to also think about. Okay. Spillover effects, there could be positive effects, there could be negative spillover effects. Again, if it is positive spillover effects, then you are underestimating the effect of the program. If it is negative, then you are overestimating, and you need to be aware about whether spillover effects is positive or negative. Sometimes you actually can run an intervention thinking about just spillover effects to try to understand whether a program actually has more spillover effects. And we designed an intervention in Bangladesh in the context of early childhood education, and also another program in the context of tutoring intervention in the primary school before the COVID-19. We gave some students within the classroom, we randomly picked them and actually offered them free tutoring. And we found that there is a stronger spillover effect from students who learned from our tutors to the students who did not get the tutoring, free tutoring. One effect is due to the people who did not get, their parents were more enthusiastic and they actually hired new tutors because there is some competition going on. And the other effect is due to directly transferring knowledge from the treated students to the untreated students. So you can design the intervention in a way that can actually generate maximum spillovers. And in fact, in some cases, what we did, we actually picked some students that we knew in priority that these students will be able to generate more spillovers. And the way we did is we picked the students who have more friendship, okay? And the students who are more socially networked are able to generate more spillover because these students are connected more with other students. And so we actually randomly, again, we picked from some schools, these socially connected students in another schools. We did not pick, but we knew who are the socially connected, and we compare to try to understand whether this network students are better able to spillovers. So this is another way to also think about actually, the maximizing the effect of the program. Um, um, a lot of things people say that, okay, whatever you run, whether you can actually scale it up. This is an important issue. Before you scale it up, John List has a new book actually, the voltage effect. So he actually says that actually you should actually um, uh, try to replicate the intervention in different settings, contexts, and try to understand whether the effects actually work in different settings. And I do think that this is what we all need to do, but the main problem with is people who are interested in academic publication, then they might not have enough incentive because additional replication is not a new idea. You just are replicating, and the journals are interested more about the new ideas. So sometimes journal are not interested, but for the policymakers, it is important actually to whether the program that works in certain context or works in another context. So what we did is we actually showed in this program that we actually offered the free phone information during COVID-19, the like health-related intervention. But we showed in the paper how our sample compares with the nationally representative sample. So we use Bangladesh National Health, Bangladesh National Household Income and Expenditure Survey to show that which group of people we are talking about, so that you can get some idea actually whether the intervention that you ran certain group of people can be replicated in other contexts, and how much benefit it will be to other group of people. So one way, again, to give you pick a sample that is nationally representative, but you ran an intervention in a context where in a small village or in 2-3 villages that you cannot really generalize, but you can at least give some idea. Actually, look, this is my sample, and this is what the nationally representative sample. And the my sample represents this group of people. Then people get some sense that, okay, these are the group of people you're talking about, and the program can be probably at most applicable to this set of people, actually. I'm nearly at the end of my talk, actually. So the other is the general, when you are scaling up, you might have a general equilibrium effect. What is general equilibrium effect? So for example, you are giving intervention to, let's say, the tutoring program. The tutoring actually increases the test scores, the education of the students, but we did it in only 2 districts out of 64 districts in Bangladesh. So, and you might say that, okay, these students get better educated and they will have probably in future better wages, earnings, and so on. What if you give tutoring to everybody in Bangladesh? Then everybody will have more education. And so they will compete each other in the same labor market. So the wages increase that you observe for a segment of people by giving intervention only in 2 districts might not generalize when you run the intervention for the whole Bangladesh or whole country, because then everybody is benefiting, everybody is competing. So you need to keep that in mind. So program that you scale up might not generalize, the results might not generalize when you are actually happening in the whole country, actually. So scaling up is not always the answer. And sometimes you might not have enough resources, that's okay, but still you want to understand whether actually this sort of program works or not, and in what context it works, and that is still useful to know. so I will finish. So one intervention that Banerjee, Duflo, and others actually ran is a kind of large scale asset transfer program. So it's called multifaceted program. It's called asset transfer with skill and some other cash-in program, also savings together. It's called a different thing. And they found a large effects in 6 countries. So it is a kind of program, multifaceted in multiple countries, but it doesn't mean that they ran the same intervention. The content is almost same, but the different amount of money was spent in different countries, different sample size in different countries, and they found that the program worked. But then they have a recent paper where they actually try to unpack whether a component of the program works. It didn't seem that that's the case. So what it means that sometimes you need to actually offer a basket of things rather than 1 or 2 different things, because you give sometimes some, let's say, information, but people do not have money to buy the books. For example, you give information that, okay, the students, if go to school, then the returns to education is high, you should send the students to school and so on. But if you don't have money to buy the books, the students cannot go to school. So you probably want to package things. And there is complementarities between the different elements of the intervention. So once those complementarities work, then the program as a whole work, but the separate component might not work. So you also want to test about those in different settings, and if you are, if you know that the multifaceted programs work but not the separate components, then you should probably go through the package rather than the single thing. Pre-analysis plan I just covered. Finally, I think I always try to involve the local researchers to get into the field to try to monitor the work, and researchers should personally be involved in monitoring activities, because you really need to understand what is going on in the field. Sometimes researchers, maybe especially academics, are not really paying too much attention what is going in the field, and that is not a good thing. So in any team, you should have a researcher, at least one researcher, who is directly involved in conducting, monitoring the activities of the program. So in that way, you try to understand what is going on and how things are moving actually. So again, you don't have to always run the RCTs. You need to think about whether it is ethical or not that I mentioned, whether you are running intervention in a context where you should actually give everybody, you don't have time to check whether it is politically feasible, whether it is actually creating any kind of social unrest or other issues, or sometimes economists particularly, who are interested in theory. Sometimes we have a bunch of curious people. We try to just go to the field to test the theory. We have no interest in policy. So I would urge like people to think about whether if you are not interested in policy, just interested in theory, are you really do you really need to go and run this test in the field? Because some people might feel betrayed after you just run the intervention, but without any kind of link with how it can actually make changes in their lives actually. And my work that I have been trying to do is all trying to understand the welfare effect rather than testing the theory in general. So some people are interested. Finally, when you are running intervention, you should also check whether how costly it is, cost effectiveness. Cost effectiveness is basically an analysis that you actually have an impact based on the cost of the intervention divided by the impact of an indicator, the main indicator, and try to understand whether the program is actually cost effective in certain settings, or whether you can compare the effect of the program, similar programs in different contexts. So if you are interested, I have a paper where we actually document how actually you want to do it. I will finish here. I took probably over time. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Asad. A lot of things to take in, but really very informative and an interesting presentation. So at this point, we'd like to open the floor for questions. So you may unmute yourself. So please do acknowledge your institutional affiliation before asking your question. Anybody would like to start? There is a comment here from Facebook. This is from Kashfi Rayan. It's interesting to learn how Dr. Asad Islam decided on the level of randomization in his COVID-19 study. I think you have. So that's a comment on Facebook. So anybody? Let me start the discussion. I have a question actually, Asad, on with regards to the short-term vs long-term, because of course we know that doing RCT, we have a very limited resource, right? So it's mostly a short, I'm not sure if you would call it capturing the short-term effect. And you may have heard about the Hawthorne effect, that the fact that participants know that they are being observed. And what can you comment on this? And have you ever done a study where you look at a long-term effect, meaning you went back to the same group of people and study what happened, even if you're no longer doing the study?
Yeah, thanks. First, to answer the Kashfi's question, yes, so during the COVID-19, it was easier to do randomization at the individual level because lockdown and other things, people had a limited interactions. So we could actually do individual level randomization. Even the mental health intervention that we offered, it was actually at the individual level, and we conducted it over phone. But when you have the physical presence, that generates a lot of curiosity, and that is probably difficult to do when you have under the normal circumstances. So depends on you again. As I said, whether you need to think about spillovers. If spillover is likely to happen, then you need to think about randomization. If you see that within village the spillover is likely to happen, so your unit of randomization should be village level rather than individual level. Okay, so Mahav, thanks. Those are very important questions. The short term versus long term, and what is short term, what is long term? We in economics we kind of debate, right? But it depends on the context as well. But there are people who have been evaluating, like the Miguel and Kramer paper that I mentioned. Actually, the long-term, there is a recent paper, long-term effects of that intervention of the deworming program. And they actually find that the effect persists or even after, almost 15 years of the intervention. There are, I think the first thing is to see whether you have a strong effect in the short term, okay? If you do not see effect in the short term, there are very few cases with you might see that effect actually blow up in the longer term, right? So sure, if the short-term effect is strong, then it is recommended you follow up these people certain years later, a long-term effect. So a mental health intervention in Pakistan, for example, they gives a CBT program intervention, and they found that after 7 years of the intervention, the cognitive behavioral therapy actually has a longer term effects. This paper came in AER actually. So we found in our context the mental health has a large effects we have, I mean, we just finished the intervention. We have now paper. We have a plan to follow up this people over a long term. So yeah, it's important you follow up these households because you might want to underestimate the effect of the program if the program persists over a longer term, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Let me call. There's a question here from Syed Hassan. Syed, would you like to turn on your camera and ask the question yourself? Syed?
So I think it's like I say that it's one thing is the minimum detectable size effect, and yeah. So let me answer his question. Sorry,
my camera is not working. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yes, please go ahead, Asad.
Yeah, no, I mean, in order to determine the power of the effect, I mean, before you go, as I didn't have time to actually focus on the power of the sample, you need to know whether the sample size that you have is enough to detect the treatment effect. Okay, and there are separate elements, so you need to think about and what is the minimum detectable effect that you want to detect. Okay, if you think that, okay, offering a textbook, you want to increase the student test score, let's say by 0.2 standard deviation, or in plain language, let's say you want to increase the student test score by 10%. Okay, then how you actually make sure that happens? So and it depends on the sample, like whether you are randomizing at the student level or school level or classroom level. It depends on the correlation and spillovers that might happen within the students. If there is large spillover effects, then you might want to include that in your calculation. So that is and then in those cases, you should not use the classroom from others nearby schools as a kind of control group, because there might be spillover happening. So all those things need to be considered.
Okay, there's another question from Wahid Murad. Wahid, are you there? Would you like to ask your question yourself?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Professor Asad, for your nice presentation. My question is that can we use secondary data for RCT analysis? For instance, here I have written that trade agreements among some nations, and we left some other nations without agreement. Then can we use this analysis of the effect of a trade agreement using RCT? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I guess the main problem with this would be actually because why some countries are left out, other countries are not are in the agreement. So it's to begin with, so there is some selection going on, right? It could be that countries that perceived benefit through this agreement are the countries who signed up the program, while others did not. So there is selection going on. So short answer is this is not RCTs. And the second one is actually the secondary data. I mean, when we are talking about RCT, it means that before you are going and analyzing the data, you don't know the data. Okay, so secondary data means that you have the data. One option that I would think that now people are trying to do is, is kind of more in the line of big data analysis, is randomly picking a fraction of the, sample for your analysis randomly, and then check whether the results that you have actually applies to the other. So let's say 50% you randomly pick, and then do the analysis and even don't think about other 50%. Okay, and then do the analysis completely, and then ask someone else to replicate the results using the other 50% of the data. Okay, you should not touch the other 50%. Then in a way, you are kind of validating the results that you got, and you kind of can say that, hey, look, this is the data deposited in this. We took only 50%. We did not touch. We gave the code. We gave everything to another individual, not us. So we are not biased to our results. So someone else replicated our results and found the same results using a kind of another data, but from the same source, from the same. So that kind of an approach that people are using, though it's not RCT, but it is close to that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. There's another question from Romeo Arahan. Romeo, would you like to ask your question yourself?
Yes. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So I just would like to ask, so because like you mentioned about the treatment group and the control group, and of course there will be some issues in terms of the treatment group having to comply with, you know, the implementation of the project. So how do you address that? And if ever, are there some statistical means so that we can isolate those who complied and those who didn't comply?
Yes. So in in economics, or basically in statistics, we call the intent to treat effect, and then there is a treatment on treated effects. Intent to treat effect is you offer the intervention to some people, doesn't matter whether they take up the program or not. Okay. So let's say 20% people only took up the intervention. The rest 80% didn't bother about participating in the intervention. But you analyze the whole sample, or everybody, whether they took up the program or not. Okay, and you simply think about the average. So let's say the test scores, students. Okay, so 20% student took the tutoring program, 80% did not. But you actually consider all the students within the treatment schools as the treated students, and all the students in the control group as the untreated or control students. And then you take the difference. And whatever the difference you find is called intent to treat effect. So basically, intent to treat effect is the treatment effect on those you intended to offer. Whether they take up the intervention or not doesn't matter. Because when you scale up the program, you will see a similar sort of problem. So you want to see how much on average people benefit. And this is the ITT is a parameter of interest. But when you want to understand how much students actually benefit, who actually receive the tutoring, then you kind of want to analyze only the 20% of the students who actually receive the benefit. In those cases, because you offered the intervention randomly and 20% people took the intervention because of your intervention, you can kind of what we call that treatment effect on treated. So in the first stage, what you have is ITT, the take up of the intervention. In the second stage, you can use that take up as an instrument for your participation in the intervention to understand the treatment effect on treated. So in simple terms, we call two-stage list square. In the first stage, you have the take-up effect, and the second stage you have the effect on the test scores, and use the take-up as an instrument for participation, and then you have unbiased results, and in this way you can estimate the treatment effect on treated. What happens is the problem that I could not cover much is that sometimes the control students receive the intervention. Okay, and in those cases there is more problem because they so the people who should not have received the program have received the program, And in those cases, it becomes more complicated. You can simply think about the proportion of the control students who receive the intervention, how you can tackle those. So there are ways to tackle those. There are complicated econometric technique you can use to isolate the effect of treatment.
Okay. Is that okay, Romeo? Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much, Professor.
Okay, let me have the last question. This is from Facebook. Carl Handok from UP School of Economics. He's asking, is there a class of projects or programs that are more amenable to RCTs? How about macro policies like taxation?
Yeah, in the context of taxation, some people have done a lot of RCTs actually. One option, is in this case, kind of settings, it is difficult because you need to work with a tax department at least, right? And John List has papers recently in Ecuador, in the context of Ecuador, and he has papers in context of UK as well, to offer some kind of information about tax defaulters. So for example, you can send an email to say that, okay, most people, or you can give some numbers in your area, have already paid taxes, okay? It's kind of behavioral nudge, okay? To offer some kind of behavioral nudge to check whether those sort of wording or some kind of nudging actually works. The nudge theory people by Richard Thaler and others who have developed this, and there is a lot of papers, studies argue that actually nudges actually work. I have myself tried. Basically, simple information intervention can work, but it has some limit. The nudges and information has some limit. After a certain limit, what I believe is that you need to think more something else, some sort of enforcement, for example, in this case, or some kind of incentive to pay, because and once though if you have good connection with people, with country that you are working, like where I visited Bangladesh and have been talking with the tax department, actually how we actually encourage tax collection among the small farms in this setting, because if shops, small farms are usually not the taxpayers in the settings, and can we actually devise something that can actually generate some sort of tax revenue from those settings? So these are kind of there are ways to do that, but you really need clever some sort of information or nudging to begin with, and then later on probably use some sort of incentive or enforcement mechanisms. Again, you can randomize those, but in collaboration with the Department of Taxation as well.
Okay. I think that, okay, let me see. Okay, there's a comment here. Thank you, Prof. Asad, for the insights. We'll keep them in mind as we conduct our RCT on organic vegetable production and gender-sensitive technology. That's from Amelia Bello from UP Los Baños. Okay. Okay, I think at this point, I'd like to invite, because it's already 5:20 and people are already leaving for another meeting or class, but I'd like to invite everyone to turn on their screen so that we can have a photo opportunity with our speaker, okay? So while we're waiting for everybody to turn on their screen, let me invite you all to our next seminar. This will be on May 11. So another experiment paper, Strength in Numbers, a field experiment in gender, influence, and group dynamics. And our speaker is Olga Stoddard from Brigham Young University. And of course, for those of you who are asking where to get the copy of the video, it's in our Ateneo de Manila University YouTube channel, and you can subscribe and just view the playlist here. That will be most of the seminars that we had. So please join me in thanking Professor Asad Islam for that very insightful and interesting presentation. So virtual applause, please.
Thank you everybody for joining.